早安，早安，早安！开场一样，喜欢我们直播欢迎点赞、订阅、开小铃铛，然后一起来直播上面聊天哦。那一样是罗马人的战役嘛，所以先罗马人的历史跟科技树吧。395年，狄奥多西皇帝一世去世之后，罗马帝国一分为二。那经过几十年的内部动荡跟内战摧毁了帝国，东方又有匈人大迁徙引发了连锁反应，导致日耳曼人跟阿拉尼克的移民涌入了罗马边境。然后这时候边境的防御工事残破不堪，军团面临军饷不足、人员短缺的困境。于是改变新的防御策略，用象征性的兵力守住边界，依靠精锐的机动部队来迅速应对越过边界的威胁。有许多的北方邻国已经越过了边界，在领土内建立自己的据点。那帝国用土地跟财富换取这些盟友作为佣兵，虽然常常在紧要关头起了很大作用，但是逐渐演变成长期问题。他们不愿意融入罗马的文化跟法律，实际上是独立的政治实体。可能会背骨，例如说，西哥的人就在410年洗劫罗马，占领了高卢的许多地区。亚拉里克战役，5世纪的发展，罗马面临新的威胁——匈人帝国，由日耳曼人、阿拉尼克人跟匈人组成的庞大联盟，不断的袭击罗马的边境，掠夺东西罗马帝国的许多地区，向意大利北部进军，几乎攻陷罗马。那当时的教皇里奥一世介入，说服了阿提拉离开罗马，可能是因为军队里面面临了饥荒跟瘟疫等问题。453年，阿提拉去世之后，匈人帝国四分五裂，破坏了匈人联盟与罗马跟日耳曼盟友之间的权力平衡。无能的统治者溃败经济，逐渐减少了军事力量，让西罗马帝国无法阻止入侵的蛮族。汪达人掠夺了帝国在北非的粮仓，蛮族将领在宫廷上炫耀他们的实力。最后，日耳曼的酋长奥多亚瑟在476年废除了最后一个西罗马帝国皇帝，结束了西罗马帝国。第一个是村民的收集、建造跟修理的速度加 5%， 第二个是战船系跟德罗蒙系战舰的近远防各加1，第三个是兵工厂的步兵护甲科技效果加 100%， 点一防就有近远防各加2，点完2防近远防各加4，会比别人点完3防还要多一个近防。第四个是弩炮系的黄金费用减 60%， 只要30黄金。特殊单位第一个是百夫长，就是体质跟造价都比骑士贵一点点的骑士。那还有可以给这个附近民兵系单位移动跟攻击速度提升的 buff。另外一个特殊单位是军团兵，就是近远防，体质上来近远防比剑勇高1，各高1，然后血量多5，攻击少1的一个剑勇。那因为他没有攻击跟软甲，所以远防最后是一样的。那食物耗费会多15点这样子。特殊科技银冠是投射机，弩炮系的攻击速度加 33%， 然后战船系的攻击加2，还不错，有打海或打弩炮都很值得点。金冠是野战军，民兵系骑士跟百夫长的训练速度加 50%， 会有蓄力攻击加5，那人均时间是20秒。那后期的民兵系跟这个格子马还有百夫长有这个进一步的加强这样子。团队加成则是弩炮系最小的射程减1，从2变成1，比较不怕贴上来的敌军。看一下军事建筑吧。射箭场的话呢，没有母子团安息人，后期也没有3级射，所以射箭场只能打前期的弩兵跟战矛。军营的话，刚刚有说过了，军团兵其实比剑勇的体质好。那骑兵是全满的，马厩的话有品种跑术、轻骑兵跟格子马，还是 OK 的。公文器制造所的话有重冲跟重弩，那没有。也有中投，那没有中投跟火炮，还 OK， 还算堪用。然后兵工厂少了步兵3防，但刚刚已经说了嘛，点完1、2防效果是大于3防的。然后没有3级射，导致后期的工兵射箭场不太能够玩。那后期的战船也会有射程减1的劣势这样子。码头的话呢，有完整的火战船跟射船，那工程也有德罗蒙战船。后期重要的科技造船员也有，只少了船坞。后期的移动速度跟运输船的装载量有差，其他都还算 OK。那要注意是完全没有自爆船。大学的话呢，常用的科技都有，没问题。城堡的话没有围篱，城堡血量会少 20%， 差蛮多的。修道院没有基本的神圣思想加血科技，后期也没有神权政治，僧侣也不太能玩。经济科技只少了2级采石，其他都有，还蛮 OK 的哦。那今天来介绍一下模组吧。今天要打的是这个，一样是 AegidiusCN。那我们这个作者叫做 MLC8896，那我们这个翻译的人叫做 Street Matter 621，那么开始第一关了，燃烧之房屋 ，Go Go。
Darkness seems to thicken around me within these few hours preceding dawn. I went through the whole night bowed over maps and reports. How could I possibly sleep? I don't know what pushes me to write right now, out of all moments. Ever since I was raised, Rome has always evoked an idea more than a place to me. I've never set even one foot in the city myself. Oh, I roamed the ruins of decaying monuments as a child and read the tales of the heroes of old as I grew up. Scipio Africanus, Gaius Marius, Julius Caesar. The glory of those names seems to echo in the void of the rotten world I was born in. It is my belief that we live at a time when a great man isn't just enough to challenge fate anymore, but could three succeed? Aegidius was no ordinary man himself. Raised as a soldier from a noble Gallo-Roman family of old, he started his military career under the command of no one else than General Aetius. It was there, in the mud and the air, thick with smoke of the military camps, that Aegidius was to cross path with two other not-so-ordinary men.
那要向AegidiusCN报告，然后我们的主角 Aegidius 是这样念吗 ？Aegidius 要活着，那 Aegidius 也要活着。本关从封刃开始只有8个人口上限，随着 Aegidius 在军队不断晋升，最后会进到城堡时代，并扩大军队规模，可以训练更可能多的士兵，但无法建造建筑，也无法采取资源。把受伤的单位驻扎在城堡，把满血的部队派往前线，可以保留珍贵战力。Aegidius用自己的节奏来率领他的部队进军，不要让他冲得太多，提前为他清理道路的敌军可以减少他的伤亡。只要他能够早点从你那边获得足够补给，也可以处理他遇到的任何敌人。他的军团也能够修复他能够控制的桥梁。为自己获取资源最简单的方法就是洗劫强盗的营地，清色。也可以透过升级每个军衔，击败敌人完成任务来获得赚取黄金。一旦法兰克的红色开始对屠龙紫色发动进攻，要观察战况，预计还有多少时间在城市沦陷之前增援，尽量保持英雄的血量。他们是强而有力的作战单位，不要犹豫在战斗中使用英雄吧。Aegidius 作为重骑兵有践踏能力，高卢的罗马军团蓝色由Aetius将军率领，有几个军务长官，包括指挥重装骑兵队的马约里安。然后 Aegidius 绿色是前途无量的年轻军官，透过自己的勇气跟实力在军队中晋升。军团人数不多，但仍然是最精锐的步兵，由百夫长指挥获得野战军的加成，所以这时候已经有金冠。屠龙城紫色遭到法兰克军队大规模进攻，他们从东北入侵高卢，该城已经被完全包围。虽然可以透过依靠破旧但坚固的城防来迫使法兰克人不得不长时间攻城，但如果被打开缺口，就只能依靠长矛兵、步弓手跟弩炮来防御。法兰克人58都是红色，以支付兵闻名，会投掷可怕的斧头，在近战中使用盾牌。尽管他们也配备了一些弓箭手跟工程武器，但是目前对骑兵兴趣不大。屠龙跟奥雷利亚洛鲁姆之间的地区被森林跟沼泽覆盖，有很多河流，控制桥梁并修复破损的地方，可以穿越乡村。高卢形成灰色，是一个富饶的地区，被很多问题困扰，例如说基础设施的破败跟猖獗的强盗。那些被迫成为巴高达的塞尔特劫掠者，黄色，最初反抗罗马在高卢的统治，大多数人是靠劫掠为生，最终劫掠了当地人。很显然，他们长城之处会有大量的资源。最后，必须要注意该地区游牧民族阿兰人青色，他们受罗马邀请在高卢西北部定居，也许是个轻率的决定，也就是说他们会被俘。尽管如此，还是愿意跟罗马协商，提升他们的地位。
God be praised! The barbarians are utterly crushed, and our good city is saved. All hail Majorian!
When the Franks broke the siege of Terrorum and fled in panic, it was the name Majorian that the relieved inhabitants praised. Aetius had remained defending the road leading to the city, while Majorian pounced onto the enemy with the full might of the Roman cavalry, crushing them under a hail of hooves and steel. Aegidius and Ricimer, who fought in the first line, took the full measure of the new popularity of Majorian among the people. The news of the young, dashing officer's exploits traveled quick, far and wide. So much so that it wasn't long before his name became more mentioned within the political circles in Rome than on the battlefields of Gaul. Pushed by the pressing advice of his spouse, Aetius himself considered ending Majorian's life. And yet, even the old general and shrewd politician couldn't resolve himself to murder him, simply dismissing him from the army instead. Was he moved by his actions and his pure, genuine dedication to Rome? Or did he glimpse at his own reflection looking at the young hero? I cannot say for sure. But one thing I know is that this brief moment of weakness, or should I say of moral rectitude, didn't go unnoticed by others. Aetius was assassinated shortly after, and the order came from no one else than Emperor Valentinian himself. There's an old Roman saying, "A fish always rots from the head down." And so the head quickly fell. Aetius's death was avenged 6 months later by 2 of his former bodyguards. From the strife caused by the following succession crisis, Majorian's party simply wiped the floor with any opposition. Thanks to his own reputation, the landed power of Aegidius, and the cunning of Ricimer, nobody could stand in its way. Well, Ricimer's mercenaries and the Frankish auxiliaries, newly recruited by Aegidius, made sure of it. Less than 2 years after the old Aetius's death, as his friend Majorian was seating himself on the imperial throne, Aegidius was made Magister Militum per Gallius, the most powerful military officer of the empire.
三足之鼎立，出花。
What is a barbarian? For a long time, the answer had been simple enough. The barbarian was the enemy, the opposite pole of civilization, by deeds and manners. But how many times did I witness Roman citizens turning temples into pigsties, baths and monuments being cut up, bits by bits, and molded back into hovels? One of the first things Majorian did upon sitting on the imperial throne was to decree that all those who were to be found guilty of desecrating monuments or public infrastructures would have both their hands cut off, on the spot. Majorian and Aegidius shared the same belief that the barbarians had to be fought on all grounds, not only on far-off battlefields, but also in the very heart of our cities, among the Romans themselves. Citizens had grew too fond of living in a false idea of eternal peace, and they were now paying the full price for their hubris. I don't know when Romans started to abhor the idea of military service itself. In the past, bearing arms was a privilege as much as a sacred duty. So did I read. As far as I can recall my memories, the army has always been filled with foreigners of all origins and of all kind of valor. It is as the Romans couldn't be bothered to defend their own empire anymore. But by yielding its own defense to outsiders, Rome had also put itself to their goodwill. Majorian was all too conscious that he owed his throne to the mercenaries of Ricimer, and although he couldn't have hoped for a better ally, he knew that this balance had to change if the empire was to rely upon a real Roman army ever again. After having edicted laws in favor of natality, the new emperor resolved to reclaim all lost territories, starting with southern Gaul. There, he had tasked Aegidius, helped by General Nepotianus, to open hostilities against the ever-expanding Visigoths of Theodoric II. Under the cover of years of anarchy, following Aetius's death, the Visigoths had conquered the Suebian kingdom in Hispania and seized the imperial city of Narbo Martius in Gaul. Meanwhile, local rebels had Lugdunum, the provincial capital of Gauls, handed out to Burgundian invaders. While gathering a large army in Italy with Ricimer, Majorian was confidently relying upon Aegidius to achieve the impossible, nothing less than halting and checking the advance of the Visigothic onslaught at Arelate, all by himself.
The Visigoths are marching on the city right as we speak. I fear that the situation is hopeless.
Nonsense. The Emperor assured me of his support, and his troops are on the way. We must prepare and hold off the Visigoths until his arrival. Arelata will stand.
要保卫这个圆形竞技场，阻挡敌军直到马约里安抵达。城堡在开局可以升级到帝王，可是只有125人口。跟盟友们合作很重要，才有办法对抗西哥德、橙色、勃艮第、紫色的众多野蛮的军队。弩炮可以守卫桥头堡跟防御工事，喷火船可以烧掉冲车，用闪光来指挥盟友进攻，安排核弹射闪光。选择重新整合巴高达黄色到帝国，他们会向我斗内支援。摧毁他们的城中就可以立刻夺取他们的资源，不用摧毁所有城市，只要摧毁闪光树城堡就可以夺回这2个城市。在地中海或是罗纳河中捕鱼可以快速获得食物，但要确保我的制海权。罗纳河三角洲周围的沼泽地是半野生白马跟野生黑牛的家，可以吃当重要的食物来源。AegidiusCN 跟尼波提亚鲁斯将军一起负责阿尔勒城防，在罗纳河口阻止迪奥多里克橙色的进军。虽然有一些法兰克的辅助部队，但需要迅速强化驻军。罗马的军队更注重品质而不是数量。马约里安现在是西罗马帝国的皇帝，率领庞大的军队来增援，由罗马军跟工头骑组成，还有百夫长。李希梅尔是西罗马帝国的2号人物，他跟他部队留在意大利，主要是日耳曼的雇佣兵，有需要的话可以提供支援。西哥的人橙色控制的阿尔勒西部沿海的纳博马蒂尤斯，以及保护通往该城的2个堡垒。会利用数量的优势冲垮我们，用大量的步兵跟骑兵来冲垮工事，用冲车撞击他们的防御建筑，甚至会建造战船。但他们的哥德人的海战能力是有限的。西罗马帝国陷入战争泥沼，勃艮第占领了鲁格杜鲁姆城，原本是高卢的前首府，拒绝归还该城。马约里安决定不再容忍这种侮辱，远离罗马管理下该地的巴高达人，就是之前没叛乱的人，已经采取利用之前的建筑材料建立到自己的小型社区。尽管混乱，经过罗马帝国几十年镇压，他们在各方面都陷入四面楚歌的情境。他们愿意再度向罗马帝国妥协，但当你保护他们免于潜在威胁，他也会给你带来新的挑战。你也可以使用武力抢夺他们的土地跟资源。
Fair enough. You made your point, Caesar. I bow to the Empire once again, and my warriors shall march against your enemies like they did before.
Rome is victorious once again. All hail Caesar!
We still have a lot on our plate, my friend. Gaul is secured for now, but I have plans for Hispania, and Africa is still at the hands of the Vandals.
My mind is catched by the flickering flame of my candle, each draft of wind menacing to blow it away forever, my mere whispers making it shiver. This was the very state of the empire when Aegidius faced the Visigothic army in front of Arelate. In one swooping victory, he crushed the backbone of the enemy onslaught, and upon Majorian's arrival, at the head of his legions from Italy, the flame of Rome was yet again blazing with a strength not seen since the days of the heroes of old. Together, they brought Theodoric and his people to their knees and back into the federati status they had escaped from at the favor of the civil strife. Together, they punished the traitors in Lugdunum and fought back the Burgundians into submission. In one single campaign, Roman standards were once again feared by all, and hope began to grow back into the citizen's heart. A whole nation was standing behind its emperor, like never before. Nothing seemed out of reach for Majorian and his most trusted friends. The Visigoths had to concede the lands they occupied in Hispania, and General Nepotianus had the lost Suebian territories quickly reconquered. While Aegidius was traveling back to Arelate to administrate and pacify the newly reconquered territories, Majorian was already planning his next move. This time, against the Vandals of Africa.
那我们就进第3关了，朱路的尽头。
I can hear the distant howls of a pack of wolves, probably closing on their prey in the dark, and I feel a shiver running down my spine. I know how these animals hunt all too well. They patiently stalk their prey at first from afar. As they get closer and closer, they carefully observe, looking for weakness. They can smell it. It's their instinct. Aegidius had witnessed the full might of the newly reconstructed Western Imperial fleet as the warships gathered in the port of Arelate. When they sailed out down the delta towards the sea and the distant ports of Hispania, this mighty armada seemed invincible. And it probably was. If only it could have been brought to the fray. A few days before the landing operations against the Vandals, as the fleet was harbored in Carthaginensis, Vandal spies used the cover of darkness to set a few ships aflame. In one night, the fire had consumed most of the fleet, and the hopes of Majorian to reconquer Africa had went away, in smoke and ashes. When Aegidius welcomed his friend in Arelate, on his way back to Italy, he could barely recognize the confident emperor that left the city a few months prior. Majorian appeared absent, not quite muted, but walled up on himself and distant as wary of an invisible menace. Against all idea of prudence, Majorian dismissed the troops, left Aegidius in charge, and rode off towards Italy with a small and fast-moving escort. The wolves had been starving for too long already, lurking in the shadow at the edge of the woods, and they just had smelled weakness.
Open the gates!
Treachery! Treachery is upon us! We were part of Emperor Majorian's traveling retinue, General. We got ambushed on the road by Ricimer's men. The Emperor was captured and assassinated.
Damnation! May that snake rot in hell! It is clear that Ricimer wants to seize power for himself. This infamy cannot go unpunished. I will oppose this vile traitor with all my power. Tell me what the situation is.
Ricimer planned his move carefully. We barely made it out alive. He secured the support of the few remaining troops of the region, and his mercenaries are currently blocking all exit roads from the city.
Surely Ricimer would never count on my support. He wants me dead, and knows that I would try to reach my domain in northern Gaul. I fear that we have to make a stand here, in Arelate. Commander, make your report on the defenses.
It doesn't look good, General. Here, in the northern district, there's only one ballista and a few mercenaries posted at the gatehouse, but no meaningful fortifications beside the walls.
我们要守住这个阿雷拉特阿尔勒，那士气降到0的话就会失败。要保护好我的城堡跟城镇中心，还有 Aegidius。那定量关不能够建立自己的经济体系，村民没办法采集资源，也不能训练新单位。有些时候可以获得增援，在城堡可以研究所有的军事科技。士气值会随着时间每分钟减少1点。单位被击杀也是，击杀敌人每5个人会获得1个士气值。士级可以交易，还可以获得黄金。每个单位都很重要，注意船、工程武器，请使用村民修理。受伤士兵也可以送到修道院附近去治疗。尝试找到适合击杀敌人的地方，诱敌深入，提前设置路障或是木栅栏跟防御塔，保留一支随时前往压力比较大的地方的预备队。敌军会尝试从不同的地方进攻，击退敌军攻击之后，骑兵可以出城袭击，因为骑兵可以随时后撤退。不要冒险，锁好城门，只有需要出城的时候才打开，记得保存进度。有空的时候可以侦查城市，会获得有用的情报。那李希美背叛之后，我们被困在了阿雷拉特。 没有什么补给，也没什么士兵，大部分都是训练不足、装备很差的城市警卫。然后 AegidiUS的胜算也不大。我们被李希梅尔的军队包围了，准备发动多次进攻，采取抵抗，会对任何抵抗采取行动。那李希梅尔希望快速获得胜利，他不想要长时间包围阿尔勒，也不会一次性投入他的全部兵力。对攻城势在必得，他疏忽了自己对周围资源的守备。获得了皇室的金库之后，李希梅尔贿赂了军官跟罗马军，向他臣服。其实有些人支持的马约里安，有时候有可能在适当的机会向我们倒戈。李希梅尔会在需要的时候发动舰队来攻击阿尔勒。
The priests say that the devil often disguises himself as an angel of light. For how long Ricimer had been plotting Majorian's demise exactly? Nobody knows for sure. Probably as soon as he realized that the horse he had bet on wasn't one he could so easily break and tame. Well, Ricimer never really hid his ambitious nature. After all, he was the mind behind the idea of having the Emperor Avitus executed after he had been deposed. And yet, murdering a usurper was one thing, but assassinating a friend in cold blood? On his side, Aegidius had grown more suspicious about Ricimer's intentions for quite a while. It came as no surprise that the first thing the traitor tried to do was to have him killed. Having Aegidius trapped in Arelate, cut off from his domain in northern Gaul and from his Frankish allies, Ricimer could already taste victory. Against all odds, Aegidius not only managed to escape the city, but he did so after having tactically defeated the formidable force sent against him. It is difficult to figure out what was going through Aegidius's mind as he was traveling north towards his domain and family, not knowing what to expect upon arrival. Torn between his grief over Majorian's death, his hate against Ricimer, and his angst for his own entourage. He was probably measuring how Ricimer had just wasted all the bloodshed for the Empire over his personal ambitions, as well as the full scale of the fights ahead.
The 第4关，皇帝与将军。
Traveling alone, but not without the help of many a brave citizen, Aegidius had Ricimer bested the second time in a row when he arrived before the soldiers to his family estate. God knows what Ricimer's dogs would have done had he failed to put his people in safety. Back in Italy, Ricimer had effectively brought the reign of his own tyranny. All-powerful that he was, he simply couldn't just sit on the throne himself as a man of barbarian extraction. He desperately needed a replacer for Majorian, and one he could make his own creature this time. In the meantime, his realm was solely maintained by violence, corruption, and terror. It was in that regard that Ricimer revealed his true self. Even though he had managed to climb to the top of Roman society, being processed by it since his very childhood, he had essentially remained a barbarian, for whom nothing was too sacred, for whom nothing was too shameful. Majorian's murder was not so much Ricimer's victory than it was Roman society's defeat. Rome had allowed the eternal, quintessential barbarian, as poorly disguised as he had been, into its very heart. And nobody had seen through the masquerade, not even the best of us all. Not even Majorian. It is my belief that this infamy had happened because Romans had become barbarians themselves. They allowed it. I've seen my share of agonizing soldiers on the battlefields. When a body is so badly mangled that all its will to live is crushed, that mere breathing becomes insufferable, it welcomes death. It asks for it. Rome's old, aching, decaying body had just been granted its own wish.
这关的话，我们的 AegidiusCN 要存活，那要寻求帮助。目前在独自逃亡，封建时代开局只有50人口上限，最多可以把人口提到150，而且可以进入帝王时代，可以进入船屋，可以建造船屋在河流捕鱼，但是没有办法建造船舰。有很多高卢罗马军团的士兵，甚至里希梅尔的军队，也有人对我们保持忠诚。杀死他们的军官，或是让 Aegidius 出面的话，就可能会有人改变立场。赶快侦察并压制罗马叛军黄色，要赶快攻占一座城市，控制一座城市，不管是奥雷利亚诺鲁姆，或是卢泰西亚之后，就可以升级到帝王时代。每占领一个城市会提供50的人口上限。西哥德王国陈设的北边边境在这附近，没有卷入里希梅尔跟 Aegidius 的争端，维持现况，不要挑衅他们。另外，阿兰人在领土西边派遣了一支强大军队，跟他们取得联系的话，可以成为宝贵的盟友。法兰克人可以成为强大的盟友，而不是你的负担，只要保护好他们。随着里希梅尔叛变跟谋杀 Majorian 之后 ，Aegidius 逃离阿德拉特，然后前往卢瓦尔河河谷。被剥夺了高卢军务长官头衔，但还是有部分士兵跟当地居民的忠诚。里希梅尔掌握了西罗马帝国的领导地位，蓝色，因为他是野蛮人，无法自己登上皇位，所以要找一个傀儡。那害怕 Aegidius 跟高卢的军队会来阻止我们。Majorian 的突然驾崩引发了北高卢的无政府状态，几个城市宣布脱离帝国，包括西边的这个奥雷利亚诺鲁姆跟北边的卢泰西亚。叛军就是黄色，不愿意跟我们站在一起。快攻他们！该地区还有几个势力，红色法兰克人没有领导者，国王已经流亡，但他们是我们的联盟军，是我们的盟友。目前受到勃艮第人的威胁，要帮助他们，保护他们，懂内他们。勃艮第人失去了这个城市实力大减，但还是主要势力之一。然后西哥德人对想要占领卢瓦尔河以北的土地，这样子处于防御的态势，对里希梅尔态度保持谨慎跟不确定。阿兰人则是在边境最西边部署他的军队，贪心哥德人在入侵，作为联盟军，他们会跟我们合作。齐威瑞，他没嘞，干，好烂。
But do not worry, King Theodoric himself is on his way to put you down, and with the blessings of the Roman Emperor.
General, the troops are all behind you, and you lead the most powerful armies in the West. If you march on Italy now to depose Severus, Ricimer will have nothing to oppose you.
It wasn't an intact bit of Rome that Aegidius and Count Paulus managed to save from the hands of the barbarians in northern Gaul. It was an intact bit of civilization. A safe haven in which not only Romans but also Alans, and now Franks, could find freedom, law, and order. Something worth fighting for, regardless of one's origins. Aegidius's rump state was standing like a rock in the midst of raging waters. Its mere existence was an insufferable insult, a spit in the face to all barbarians, foreigners, or Romans alike. A cold statement that Barbary wasn't to be tolerated anymore. To Ricimer, it was to live every day of his life in terror at the idea of an unstoppable Aegidius at the head of a Gallo-Roman army, marching down upon Italy to crucify him. Having sold away without a second thought pieces of the empire, bits by bits, to any faction he had something to wrench out from, Ricimer finally had turned towards Theodoric. Not only did he cede back Hispania and Narbo Martius to the Visigoths, but also did he promise them all the lands north of the Liger River. Helpless after his defeat at Arelate, Ricimer was now relying upon the huge Visigothic army, led by Frederick, brother of King Theodoric, that was marching north towards Aurelianorum, the key of the Liger Valley and the gate of Aegidius's domain.
好，来吧 ，Aegidius 第5关，奥雷利亚诺鲁姆之战。
Most people live their whole life with fear nailed in their heart, their every decision being ruled by it. To live free of fear is to fight every day against it. How many do manage to win this fight, even one single time in their whole adult existence? I am convinced that the strength to do so lies deep into the most of us. when a society is decomposed, those who manage to mobilize it cannot seem to do it at the same time, in a coordinated manner. Freeing men from the choking yoke of fear, all at once, as one single body. That is what makes history. It takes more than a man to achieve this exploit in the times we live in. It takes a hero. The simple fact that Aegidius managed to bring not only Gallo-Romans, but also Alans, Sarmatians, and Franks together onto the same field to face an army the size of which nobody has seen in Gaul since Attila's invasion, speaks miles about his valor. Although it was Ricimer who sent the Visigoths against Aegidius's rump state, these distant political purposes had begun to fade away for the people. Had it happened a couple of years prior, nobody would have come onto the field that day, and the Visigothic hordes would have simply taken over, unopposed. The men who showed up before Aurelianorum to oppose the Dogs of War didn't come to fight Ricimer, nor did they come for the Empire. They came to defend their homes, their land, their families, like they would have done against wild beasts. United behind their leader, they came to say that they wouldn't have it, and that they were not afraid. Not on that day.
General, the troops are ready and waiting. Shall you address them?
Brave Alans, Sarmatians, men of the steppe, once again you stand with Rome as true friends. But today, you also fight for the freedom of your people. The Visigoths won't show any mercy, so make sure you give them none. Romans, men of Gaul, today we fight the Visigothic hordes Ricimer sent against us, for he's too cowardly to face you himself. God is on our side. Keep your ranks, follow your officers, and victory will be yours. Roma Victor!
Hail Aegidius!
Fearless warriors of the Franks, I am honored to fight once again with the bravest soldiers in Gaul. Tonight you shall have the spoils of victory and all the glory to share. Vae Victis!
And so it begins.
好，我们要击败橙色西哥的军队，击败黄色加尔丁级骑兵。法兰克人不能被击败，红色。这次决战关卡，帝王赛开局有大军、攻势跟大量储备资源，150人口，不能建船坞跟石墙。好，双方军队会立即发生冲突，要最快速度建造需要的军事建筑，研发有用的科技，熟悉指挥阿兰人3、4的口令，他们精锐骑兵可以扭转许多的局势，不要让他们进行无意义的战斗，将不断面临战线的压力。如果成功击杀将领的话，攻击间距就会拉长，降低他们士气。阿兰跟法兰克盟友团队加成，加上罗马野战军的科技，让你的骑士获得更多加成。西哥的人的加尔丁级标枪兵是短射程的重装标枪骑兵，主要在马上作战。标枪会造成真实伤害，并回避敌人的远程伤害。重装骑士最适合对付他们单位，不要追太远。为了阻止在意大利爆发冲突，李希梅尔要促使迪奥多利克国王攻击 Aegidius 的领土，承诺他可以获得很多领地啊，卢瓦尔河以北的土地。为了反制他的进攻 ，Aegidius 跟流亡归来的法兰克国王希尔德里克结盟，组织了一支庞大的高卢罗马军队，还有阿兰跟萨尔马提亚的辅助军队。Aegidius 绿色将军队部署到了一条通往奥雷利亚诺鲁姆的道路直线上面，然后包围了路程通道，守卫着渡口。我的军队在中线，与法兰克步兵红色在一起，由国王亲自指挥，然后骑兵在两翼。战场的对面西哥德敞开队形，覆盖了相同的宽度。他们有精锐标枪骑兵，就是所谓的加尔丁级标枪兵，在战线中间。然后西哥德人由国王的兄弟弗雷德里克指挥，在后方的小山丘上面，全程受到自己的护卫保护。基本上是西哥人征服西班牙行省时叛逃的前精锐罗马军团。很多时间可以玩。
The Visigoths' main army is crushed. Victory is near!
The day is ours. The Visigoths are utterly crushed, and Theodoric's own brother is slain. Let us feast and celebrate. For the next spring, we shall march on Italy and beat this traitor of Ricimer back to hell.
The swarms of Visigothic cavalry were smashed by the iron-clated Alan riders of Aegidius, while his legionaries were advancing alongside the Frankish warriors of Childeric, their shields interlocked into a formidable, unrelentless wall of steel and determination. Utterly crushed, few were the Visigothic warriors who managed to outrun the Alan horses. Frederick himself was hacked down where he stood, just as the traitors of his bodyguard. His death immediately threw the Visigothic kingdom into a deep succession crisis, and Ricimer saw his last card slipping away from its hand, facing with terror that the path between him and Aegidius' wrath was now fully cleared. The thought of Ricimer spending sleepless nights, dreading the next message from his spies reporting on the ever-growing army of Aegidius, is honey to my soul.
那我们最后一关咯，罗马人之王。
Alas, what Ricimer couldn't achieve by the bite of his fangs, he finally achieved it by the creep of his venom. As he was about to march his army down south to avenge Majorian's death and to free Italy from evil itself, my father succumbed to poison poured in his cup by a spy. For it is I, Syagrius, son of Aegidius, who has picked up the torch of civilization in his footsteps, right where it fell, as its light was dimming out once again, and darkness was about to swallow it forever. They call me King of the Romans. I do not fancy myself with such a title. I do not fight for Rome anymore, nor do I fight for crowns and titles. I fight for my father's legacy. I fight for those under my responsibility. I fight against barbarians.
My lord Syagrius, the crypt is ready to welcome the remains of your father, so that he may rest in peace within God's realm.
God certainly works in mysterious ways, but he claims my father's life just before he could restore Rome to its true self. I'm not learnt in spiritual matters, but I have the honor to have known your father and to have fought by his side. If you are even half the man he was, I have no doubt that you will make him proud. Still, the alliances that stood with my father are in shatters now that he's gone. And marching on Rome in this precarious situation would only compromise my possessions here in northern Gaul. Indeed, sire. Yet the central position of your realm makes your alliance valuable to some of the barbarian kingdoms, vying for power in Gaul. The Franks, the Bretons, or the Visigoths are all competing for Roman support. Securing an alliance with one of these powers may just buy us a fighting chance. But if I am to rise above these petty kings and usurpers, I must first restore my authority over the region and claim a new legitimacy to rule.
要在修道院里面放7个圣物，然后至少要有个修道院存活。城堡是在开局控制的一片庞大而松散的领土，150人口可以升级到帝王，跟罗马的本土完全隔绝，无法训练百夫长，也无法研究罗马的独特科技。要注意，Shaklius 本人还是有百夫长的光环，无法建造更多的城堡、修道院跟大学，要格外保护这些东西。可以选择不与任何人结盟，但是最初选择的盟友所属的文明会给你独特的科技跟单位。被敌对势力包围，这些势力也互相提防，初期不会对我发动太大进攻，势力做大的话，他们会攻击我们。好，理论上来说，罗马在几十年就撤离了北部利塔尼亚省，有罗马人被困在那里，是不是还活着？可以去找他们。阿兰跟萨尔玛的辅助军队还是在我的领土上面，找到他们就可以召唤他们。绿色继承了 AegidiusCN 在北 高卢北部的大片领土，军力分散，与罗马帝国完全隔绝，不能再仰赖罗马的单位跟科技，也无法修建城堡、修道院跟大学。法兰克的红色、布列塔尼人青色跟西格的人橙色，先前与AegidiusCN结盟或签约的条约，先放弃这个义务，对我们的领土保持中立，或许可以挽救其中一个势力，获得特殊单位跟科技。其他势力则是采取了敌对状态。紫色在东南边，黄色阿勒曼尼人，另外一个嘉宾是萨克逊人在北边。在北边，罗马帝国很久就撤离了海对面的布里塔尼亚行省，罗马文明可能被消灭，要登岛才能确认。OK。
Victory is mine.
Rome's heart still beats strong in Gaul, and my rule is questioned by none, warlord nor king. The old world is at dusk, but a new era has already dawned. It has been more than 30 years now that Aegidius has left us. I live like a ghost at a time when the old world has already died, but when the new one hasn't been born yet. I am tired of reaching out for the first, as well as I desperate for the latter. Ricimer is long dead and forgotten, without any legacy of his own, beside the evil he brought to this world. The Empire is finished. I watch the dawn breaking on my encamped army. Today, my 6,000 carefully picked soldiers will face 6,000 Frankish warriors. This was what King Clovis and I had settled upon to end the decade-long conflict that broke between our realms, once united under Aegidius's command. Whoever triumphs upon this day on the plains of Novidunum will rule over both the Franks and the Gallo-Romans, without destructions, without desecrations, without unnecessary bloodshed. Today, Barbary stays on the battlefield, and the torch of civilization passes to the best of us. If I get the better of Clovis and crush his army, I won't be simply Roman anymore. Yet if my opponent emerges victorious, he will likewise cease to be just a Frank. Whoever the winner is, before the sun sets upon this day, he and his people will have become something new.
“那我们今天直播到这边，喜欢我们直播欢迎点赞、订阅、开小铃铛，然后一起来直播上面聊天哦。